Hi everybody, welcome back to Elizabeth Ann Reads. Today we're going to talk about goals. The goals I had in 2020 and the goals I will have going into 2021. We're just going to revisit those things, talk about a few stats from the year, and just do kind of a whole year general wrap up. So going into 2020, I had kind of 4 separate lists of 20 things that I wanted to read in 2020. I will link that playlist below and above in case you want to check that out. Basically, I had 20 authors, 20 specific backlist books, 20 rereads, and then 20 categories that I wanted to read, 20 books in each of those categories. And there could be overlap. I know that sounds like a ridiculous amount. There could be overlap between the categories. But we're just going to touch on those and see how I did. Spoiler alert, not very well. But let's go through them pretty quick. I'm not going to dive deep into any of these things, but let's go through them and see what we accomplished and didn't accomplish. So to start with the 20 backlist books that I wanted to read in 2020, I read 6. I read 6 of them. So that's not great. I also decided 2 of them I'm not really interested in anymore after I've heard more about them and just kind of their style. I just don't think they're going to be for me, so I unhauled 2 of them as well. So that makes 8 total, which is still not great. But let's go through what I read. So the 6 that I did read were Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. I read that way back in January and February with Naomi from Naomi's Bookshelf. And I enjoyed that one reasonably well. It was pretty middle of the road for me in that I enjoyed the story, but I thought it was too long and didn't like some of the content that was in there. I read The Light Between Oceans, which I enjoyed. Would probably not read again, though. M.L. Stedman is the author on that one. I read Villette by Charlotte Bronte, which was also pretty middle of the road for me. I read Swiss Family Robinson by an author I can't remember, but it'll be here, which I enjoyed. I buddy read that one with Ange from Literary Labors. And then I read both Persuasion and Northanger Abbey, and that completes my read of Jane Austen's novels. That's all of them now that I've read. So those were the 6 that I did read. And then the 2 that I've decided I'm not that interested in anymore are Peace Like a River by Leif Enger. I know a lot of people really love this book. Just the more I hear about it, I really think it's not for me. I think it's going to be too slow moving for me, and I'm just not interested in it anymore. And the other was My Brilliant Friend. Again, I can't remember the author, but I'll put it here. And again, the more I hear about that, I just don't think it's going to be for me. So those 2 are unhauled. The ones I haven't got to yet that I'm still hoping to get to in the future, not in 2020, is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, Bel Canto by... Man, I could not think of authors' names today. Bel Canto, it's a famous author, and I can't think of her name. Possession by A.S. Byatt, Lilac Girls, Atonement by Ian McEwan, Pale Fire by Vladimir Nabokov, The Once and Future King, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor, although I do have plans to read that the first week in January, so we're going to get to that one soon. Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel, Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, and Endurance, which is a nonfiction about Shackleton. So, and I'm also planning to read that one in January. So, high hopes to get to these next year, but we'll see. They're not going on a list. So, not great on the 20 backlist books I wanted to read. 20 authors I wanted to read, I did better on. I think I got 10 out of my 20. And the 10 authors that I did read were Leanne Moriarty, and I read 2 of her books. Brandon Sanderson, I lost track, but I think I read like a dozen of his books this year. Terry Pratchett, I read 2 of his books this year. Jennifer Donnelly, I've only read 1, but I have 1 more that I'm hoping to get to before the end of the year. Ray Bradbury, I read. Elizabeth Goudge, I read. Ruta Sepetys, I read 2 of her books this year. Kate Forsyth, I read 1 and decided she's not an author for me. Ken Follett, we already talked about. I read Pillars of the Earth, so I read that. And Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, I read the first in the Sherlock Holmes series. So that's decent. That's 50%, so that's, not great, but okay. The authors I didn't get to were Lucinda Riley, Mary Stewart, Alison Weir, Elizabeth Chadwick, Anya Seton, Susanna Kearsley, Neil Stephenson, Thomas Hardy, Jules Verne, and Robin Hobb. And then I had 20 books I wanted to reread this year. Now, I did reread 20 books, 20 plus books, but they weren't necessarily the ones on this list. So off this list, I only reread 6 of them. And those were The Never Ending Story and Momo, both by Michael Ende. The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I'm having the hardest time coming up with authors' names today. Ready Player One, I read that in preparation for Ready Player Two. Where the Red Fern Grows, and then I reread the entire Enola Holmes series, middle grade mystery series, by Nancy Springer. I'm not going to go through the ones I didn't read, but so for specific books, I read 6 out of the 20. Authors, I read 10 out of the 20, and rereads, I read 6 out of the 20. So not great. And then the other challenge was I had 20 different categories, and I wanted to read 20 books in each of those categories. I'm not going to go through all 20 lists. I'm just going to tell you what the categories were and if I succeeded or not. So the first was to read at least 20 books off my physical TBR. I did way more than that. The next was to read 20 books, at least 20 books that I acquired in 2020. I did way more than that. The third was rereads. I did way more than 20. And then we get to tomes, which is books that are 500 plus pages. On my list, I have 14 that I read, but I know I also read several that were like in the 480 to 499 range. So I read several more quite large books. So if I added those in, it would probably be about 20. But if we're going for very strict 500 plus pages, then I have 14 on that list, which is still, I think, pretty good. The next category was to read 16 new favorites. And I realized this is a really hard category because I have no idea when I read a book if it's going to be a new favorite or not. But right now there are 16 books on the list. And there are some others that I could arguably add to the list that I will reread. So I think I did pretty good with that. One category was to read at least 20 books set outside the US and the UK. I did more than 20. The next category was to read 20 plus books under 200 pages. I accomplished that one. And then I had a category called Booktube Darlings. So books that are really popular on Booktube. Books that I've heard multiple people talk about, not just one person. And I tend not to read really popular books, so this category was actually pretty challenging. But I have 15 down here. I have The Book Thief, The Starless Sea, The Fountains of Silence, Salt to the Sea, Sweep, Fangirl, The Way of Kings, The Night Circus, American Royals, The Kingdom of Back, The Switch, House in the Cerulean Sea, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, Hollowpox, and Pure Nessie. And there's probably arguably 1 or 2 more that I might be able to add by the end of the year. But still, I think that's pretty good. And then 20 plus books continuing on in a series I had started. I did more than that. 20 plus fantasy books, I did that. 20 plus middle grade books, I did that one. Nonfiction, I did not do very well in. I have 9 written down here on the list. I'm currently reading one that I'll finish by the end of the year and possibly one more. So I'll get to 10 or 11, but still that's not great. I definitely want to up that next year. Historical fiction, I also did not do very well on, surprisingly. I did not read much historical fiction this year, which may be why I struggled so much getting my 20 specific backlist books, because a majority of those were historical fiction. But according to my list, I only read 13 historical fictions this year. So, not great there. Books published before 1980, I read more than 20 of those. New to me authors, I read more than 20 of those. And books with movie adaptations, again, I did not do very well on. And the challenge was I was supposed to read the book and then watch the movie. And I have 9 here on my list. But the 9th one I added on and I hadn't watched the movie yet and I still haven't. So 8 books, I guess, where I read the book and watched the movie. Which, I don't really like movies, so that was kind of a silly goal to have, but whatever. Overall, I think I did pretty good in my categories challenge. I got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, look, I missed part of the list. There's 4 more categories. And this page I did not do well on. So science fiction was a category, and I have 15 out of 20. Books about books, I have 10 out of 20. books off my Goodreads TBR, so I keep my TBR separate. I have my physical TBR of books I own, and then my Goodreads TBR I use for books I don't own, but I've heard about or I'm curious about. I only have 8 marked off of that, but that one became really hard to track because I bought a lot of books this year. So a lot of books got shifted off my Goodreads TBR because I bought them, but they would have originally been there. We're going to talk about buying books in a little bit, so I don't think I did too well with that, but I kind of lost track on that one. And then the last category was award winners, and I kind of lost track on that one too. I have 15 written down, so I did okay. But anyway, for categories I actually completed, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Why do I feel like I'm missing a page? 11, 12. Looks like I got 12 of the categories completed. So that's pretty good. And the rest I had done decently in for the most part. So that was my failure of a 2020 challenge. But, I kept track. So that counts for something, right? Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about just a couple stats for the year and what I want to change going into next year. So obviously, the year's not quite over yet. We still have about 10 days left in the year. I have currently read, I think, 182 books. So I think I'll be somewhere around the 190 range at the end of the year. And that's a massive amount. I realize it's not a massive amount for everybody. It's a massive amount for me. I usually set my Goodreads goal at 60 because it's a nice round number and can divide into 12 for the months of the year, and that makes my brain happy. I always beat that easily. I usually hit somewhere around 100 books. So this was a big year, and I've enjoyed reading that many books. And then I bought a lot of books this year. I usually buy books. I have no problem buying books, but it went up exponentially this year. I tried to figure it out yesterday because I kept track for the first half of the year pretty good, and then I didn't the second half of the year, so I just went through my past purchases on Amazon and Book Outlet and Book Depository and tried to figure out everything else I'd added in there. So this number's probably not 100% accurate, but it's going to be very, very close. That is that I purchased 210 books this year. Not purchased. I acquired 210 books this year. Most of them were purchased. Some would have been gifts, things like that. But I acquired 210 books this year. And that's not great because that's more than I read in a year that I read a lot. So yeah, that's not great. I currently have 288 unread books on my shelf. I'm also not super happy with that number. I know a lot of people have a lot more than that, and that's fine. It's up to you. But for me personally, I'd like to keep it closer to around 100 unread books on my shelf. So that needs to change in this coming year. I'm not going to put myself on a book buying ban, but I'm going to try and be much more critical about the books I purchase in the coming year. Meaning books that I'm actively, a series I'm actively reading and I need the next book, or books that I have a purpose for buying immediately, like I'm participating in a group read or some sort of readathon and I need a book that I'm planning to read immediately, and not just buy books that I'm going to read maybe someday. That's the plan for the coming year. This stat. So of the books I purchased this year, this 210 books I purchased this year, 89 of them I've already read, which is over 40%, and I think that's pretty good. I know that's not a huge number, but honestly, I think that's a decent percentage of reading the books I purchased this year. So there's 122 that I purchased this year that I have not read yet. We're going to read those next year. So, and then, yeah, I think that's it for stats that I wanted to share with you. So the goals I want to talk about going into 2021, I don't have a lot of them. I'm not going to set list goals like I did last year for a variety of reasons. But let's talk about the things I am going to set as goals. So first of all, monthly, I want to make sure I'm reading a nonfiction and a classic every month. Those are things I say I want to read them, but I never naturally go pick them up. So I want to make sure that I am reading nonfiction and classics consistently. Now, I'm not going to beat myself up if I end up getting into something that's really long or dense that's taking me a long time and I end up spreading it over 2 or 3 months. That's fine, as long as I'm consistently making progress and not just avoiding reading it. So a nonfiction and a classic. The other two things I want to mention are the Buzzwordathon. This was created by Books and Lala, and then she changed it into a Goodreads group. And so there is a Buzzwordathon happening every month from the 1st to the 7th of the month. And if you don't know, Buzzwordathon, there's a specific word or theme chosen, and so you read books that include that word or theme. So, for example, in January, the word is dream. So I'm going to be reading Strange the Dreamer and some other things, but Strange the Dreamer, there's going to be a big group read of that going on. The other thing I'm going to be participating in every month is the Read Your Bookshelf Challenge. This was created by Chantel at An Intentional Life, and she just has a prompt for each month, and so you pick a book that meets that prompt for each month off your own shelves. The goal is to read the books off your shelves. So I'm going to end up using both of these readathons to try and clear my shelves. Not clear. I'm not going to clear my shelves, but, get closer to clearing my shelves. And my participation will probably vary a little bit each month. One month I may just pick one book for each of those prompts. One month I might let it be kind of a whole month theme and just read all the things that I can that meet that prompt that month. So it'll probably vary from month to month, but I want to make sure I'm including both those things each month. So yeah, the goal again is to read books off my own shelves. I'm not going to stop using the library. I'm not going to stop purchasing books if there's something I need or want, like really need or want, not just kind of need or want. But I want primarily my reading material to be coming from my own shelves. The other thing, and this is kind of a broad, non-specific goal, is that I want to read more purposefully. Sometimes I get caught up in numbers and just trying to get through as many books as I can. It's not about the numbers. I think I feel like some sense of accomplishment when I've finished a book, even if I haven't really processed it or, really in-depth read it. So I want to read more purposefully, meaning with less haste. I want to take my time a little bit more and be more thoughtful in my reading and not just be about getting through the books, but about really taking them in and processing them. And along with that, I want to make sure I'm reading books that I'm really excited about. And you all know how this goes. Being on Booktube, you see other people talk about books, and you're like, ooh, I want to read that. Ooh, I want to read that. And you start requesting all the books from the library, and you end up reading what everyone else is wanting to read that you're interested in, but the stuff you're really excited about ends up getting pushed aside a lot of the time. So I want to make sure I'm picking up the books that I am really excited about reading, and I just want to take my time and be thoughtful in my reading. So basically I want to read less, I guess. Not commit less time to reading necessarily, but just be more present when I'm reading, I guess. So that's it. Those are my goals. Again, they're not real specific, but I want to change my attitude towards reading a little bit, I think. And I want to get less unread books on my shelf. So yeah, that's it. That's my 2020-2021 thoughts and goals. So yeah, let me know down below what your goals are for 2021, if you are taking kind of a different approach this year or just doing more of the same. I'm really curious to know what other people are doing this year and how 2020 has affected your thoughts toward reading, I guess. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching.